bar where they party till the break of day. That's when I saw her, that's when she stole my heart away. Yeah.
Rick Patterson is a native singer-songwriter who was born at Kayakut on the west coast of Vancouver Island. He started his music career as a drummer, touring with a variety of different bands, including the now legendary Showdown. In 1990, during the Oka conflict, Rick co-wrote the song "The Message Is Clear." That song and its accompanying video received national airplay.
Much to say. First the thunder rumble, then a flash across the sky. There stands the Great Spirit with a tear in his eye.
Recently, he has been in the studio recording his newly released project, Spirit of the Wolf. Rick's love of music started early.
My dad was a drummer for the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and PPCLI. He played drums for them for quite a few years, 20 years. And he also played for Queen's Own Rifles. So that was basically where I got my start at drumming. I'd go down to the barracks and listen to my dad practice and work with the rest of the Army guys. My mom was also involved with music too. She played harmonica and acoustic guitar, and she would sing songs to us kids, you know, like, "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." She was always singing to us, so that's where I basically got my music from. It's always been in the Patterson family anyways. My uncles, Len and Ken Patterson, they really had a lot to do with me. Back in the early 70s, my uncle came out from Edmonton. He had really, really long hair. And it's strange when I think about it today, because he didn't bring me music, you know, from the 60s, you know, that folk peace music on, you know, on peace and that. He had brought me a whole total different style of music, so confusing. It was called funk back in those days, you know, Tower of Power and that. So I was really grateful for my Uncle Len, you know, involving me with that kind of music and helping me out and teaching me on a drum set.
And I gather one of the earlier bands that you were in, Dr. Pepper, was a funk band.
Yeah, it was. Wow, you do your homework.
Yeah, tell me about that band.
Dr. Pepper was basically, I got my start to them by doing sound. And down at Oil Can Harry's, we used to work for a gentleman by the name of Frank Cook. And the drummer got sick one night, and he'd taken really ill. So I just happened to be there at the right time.
How old were you at the time?
16 years old. I was pretty young back then. I wasn't supposed to be in the bars, but I'd already been used to it. I'd been in the drinking establishments since I was 14, in Legions and that. Back in those days, we used to have a drug act called the Food and Drug Act Permit, which would allow us to get into those places. So when I turned 16, that was ceased. It was no longer permits like that anymore. But when I was 16, they made a mistake on my driver's license, which made me 19. So it was pretty convenient back then.
How long after that was it before you started working with Showdown?
Showdown, 1980 is when I started working with Showdown. So I think that would have been about 2 years right after working with Dr. Pepper. In between that time, I'd worked with a gentleman by the name of Billy Dark, and he fired me after the first 2 weeks because I was too funky and too flashy. I didn't know how to do shuffles properly and too colorful. I was always
you don't
overplaying.
use brushes too much in disco, do you?
No, not at all. And I was really excited to be involved with that kind of music, you know. Because with that opportunity, I had a chance to play drums for Charlie Pride in Kamloops. Something happened to his drummer that night, so Billy Dark had hired me back again, and at the same time working with the Billy Dark School of Music, I got hired again through Gary Lee and Showdown. They showed me their material, and I couldn't believe it when I heard the Rodeo Song. They'd already had it recorded, and that foul language, I'd never heard it before on records except for by George Carlin maybe. And I was so shocked they had this in music. But, you know, I couldn't argue with $450 a week back at that time. You know, I just finished working with a group that was paying me $320, so $450 sounded pretty comfortable to me. And I thought, well, if we ever make it out to BC way, I could hide my head, you know, and hide down, and nobody will ever recognize me. And when I first invited to my parents to one of our first concerts out in Vancouver here, because they live over in Victoria, my mom loved the song, and so did my dad. They were jumping with joy, and it was a real party song.
Mm-hmm.
So I accepted it myself, and I went with the flow and stayed with that for a while, and enjoyed touring across Canada and the United States. I was fortunate enough to do that with Showdown.
Mm-hmm. And when did you start singing?
I started singing with Billy Dark professionally. I remember my first song was I don't know exactly who sang it. The version I learned was a Glenn Campbell song. I guess I don't remember what it is. All I remember the lyrics. Found the letters you wrote me this morning. It was a real country song. That was my very first song on stage. But I'd been singing way before that. You know, ever since high school, I used to sing in the choir. But I sounded like Donny Osmond, and I had to put an end to that and not sing anymore publicly, so I kind of shied away until my voice changed, and well, here it is today. And with Showdown, I was fortunate enough when Gary took ill that I could sing the lead lyrics to all the songs, and it was good vocal exercise. And then the big vocal exercises when I went to Midnight Rodeo Band,
mm-hmm.
which I'm sure you're familiar with. Yeah. And that was a good exercise for me because Jess Lee would teach me how to yodel. He says, if you're going to be a real singer, you have to yodel. So I worked on that.
Yeah, the Midnight Rodeo Band's legendary in more ways than one in country music, but I don't think people outside of country music know it very widely. Like Eddie Molesky is a household name to an awful lot of people, yet others don't know who he is at all. So
yeah,
maybe you can tell us a little bit about.
Well, definitely with Eddie Molesky, his music is definitely a household name. You don't know who the writer is because that's what he is a writer, a very talented writer. As a matter of fact, I recorded one of his songs called "Something in My Life." And every song that he writes from personal experiences. He writes from his heart. And just like Something in My Life, it was an experience with myself. His songs can relate with anybody's relationship on this planet, you know, in one way or another. Even his happy songs, you know, his ice cream songs or any of that, you know, he's real. I like Eddie Molesky, and I love recording and working with his material.
Yes, it is. If I happen to run across somebody new, then hey, I won't forget you. It's been much too good. You sure been something in my life. You sure been something in my life.
To me, it was my first wife. It really meant a lot to me, what was going on between our relationship. And my message, you know, back then was, you sure have been something in my life. It was a positive message, you know, it wasn't a sour breakup. And I've always been into songs that have a real important message to it.
And is that what brings you towards country music?
Well, country music I've always appreciated, yeah, because they've always told some pretty good stories. Whether they be good, sad, bad, happy, just join in, sing along, or... country music was basically an experiment for me to see if I could do it. It was such a challenge because it was so hard to be simple, you know. And, you know, when I got that first experience when I was a young one, you know, coming out of that funk band, I was like, so anything that was a challenge, I seemed to work at it a lot harder. And that's how I got involved with country music.
In 1990, after watching hours of television about the Oka crisis, Rick co-wrote a song called "The Message is Clear."
I just watched a show called A Dry White Season, and this show actually made me cry. I hadn't cried in years, but it dawned on me that the exact same thing here was, was happening right here in Canada.
Concerning understanding, there's so much to say. First the thunder rumble, then a flash across the sky. There stands the Great Spirit with a tear in his eye. There stands the Great Spirit with a tear in his eye.
He says, we forgot to listen to reasons and why. The greed from you all has created two sides. This land's not for sale. It's to be shared by all. Now let's sit, talk in peace, and come to resolve. Right now, let's sit, talk in peace, and come to resolve.
Listen with your heart and open your arms like the eagle in flight, hateless and charmed. Bring peace to the people of this land we share. Learn the ways of each other and teach how to care. Learn the ways of each other and teach how to care. So when hearts are open, the message is clear. When our hearts are open,
The message is clear.
Right after we finished recording this song at Bullfrog Recording Studio, we shipped them out to, probably a good 30 stations, just to check out to see if they would play it on rock stations, country stations, whatever kind of stations that, that were out there. And the response was pretty positive from the people that we did send it out to. At the same time, we were asked to go to the Country Music Awards by Fred Koch and Maggie, and they were kind enough to send us out there. And we ran into a gentleman that was down for something totally different in Edmonton when they were held there that year. He was there for something totally different, and he said he was involved with a radio station called Showdown FM, and they'd actually charted my song on #1 for this particular week, and I was shocked. And he said that he's so thrilled with the song, with what the meaning is behind the song, that he'd like to fly us up there and produce a video.
The organization that you did the video for the message is clear, the Northern Native Broadcasting Organization. Down in the lower mainland, I think we're not really aware of what that organization is and what they're doing. What did you see of what they're doing?
Well, Northern Native Broadcasting, what I've seen through them is definitely one of their biggest productions that is played throughout Canada, right across Canada. It's a program called NADA, and they're always on Friday evenings on on CBC. They're very educational of what's going on today with the Native communities, and they're very proud of themselves up there. They show what their community's doing, and how far they advance. You know, they recognize even the young kids when they win a baseball game, and they give them trophies. I just think they're a very good channel. They're really positive. As a matter of fact, they've opened up a whole new broadcasting system up, you know, in northern Canada. That's all strictly Native owned now.
Mm-hmm. It's
Native
a huge
run.
organization, I gather.
Yeah. And Kayi Productions is just an arm of NADA.
One of the things that really strikes me about the press package that went along with that was the dancer that is with you in one of the photos, Buffalo Child.
Oh, Buffalo Child.
Yeah. How did that come about?
Well, Buffalo Child used to work in our complex. I live in Native housing, and it's a fully Native community from different tribes throughout Canada, as far south as Mexico. And he used to work with the kids. Him and Wilma worked with the kids, and it was really nice. I loved the way he told stories to the kids. It was really interesting to me. I was sparked an interest. And the neat thing about it was he was teaching them something, and they didn't even realize it. So I asked Buffalo if he would originally do the talking, the speaking on there, on my song. But at that time, I'd heard Chief Fraser Andrew at the Stein Valley Festival. I heard his voice, I heard the way he talked, and how powerful his voice was. And I felt it inside that I have to use Chief Fraser Andrew. And I really wanted Buffalo Child to be involved somehow, knowing that he's an actor. I don't know how I could use this man in the song. And I asked him one day, really briefly, I said, would you mind being on the cover with myself? And we didn't see exactly how it was going to be taken at that time. We were fortunate enough, a newspaper reporter or photographer by the name of Ike Schroeder from the Surrey Leader was down, and he did the shot. And the shot on that cover was beautiful. It was perfect timing. Buffalo was really dancing to my song in the park, and behind the camera, there must be a good 50 to 75 people behind us while we were doing the shoot. And I'm really grateful today what Buffalo Child did for us, because that is an incredible picture that Ike took.
Mm-hmm. You were a dancer when you were a child.
Yes. Back in the early 70s, I used to dance with my grandparents, and they'd take us around to different potlatches and that, and we'd do ceremonial dances. And I'd been involved with it long enough back then that I was gifted with some Indian names, Awomius, Yubach, and I was really grateful to get those names as a young one, but I had no real understanding of what was going on back then, and I just accepted the names, and today I can look back and see how grateful I am and for everything that I learned from the past. It sure adds to today, you know, because I still had culture shock when I was coming back to my people again, but it made it a lot easier knowing that I am who I am.
Mm-hmm. And who is that?
Well, I am Rick Patterson. Really, I'm a full-status Native. My dad is Irish, and my mom is, she's a princess from Cayucit, but she actually belongs to the Dididat band. And it's just nice to discover where my roots are from, and that I could actually walk down both roads. I feel really fortunate that way.
During the past 2 years, Rick has taken his native country music to audiences all over the province. I asked him about the significance of his traditional native clothing.
A lot of these pieces were put together through friends of mine, and I never knew exactly how I would wear it one day and what I would use it for exactly. I'd always known that I was Native, and for some reason I knew that my direction would be the way I've chosen it to be today. And the shirt was made by a lady friend of mine by the name of Kathy Shirt. She's a Cree from Alberta, and she owns a company called Creations. My mother made the belt, and the paddles are a gift from my dad. They're made out of cedar. This is made from a friend of mine. It was gifted to me. No more will ever be made again. It's a chief warrior, Herb Rice did that for me on Vancouver Island. Of course, my mom made the choker. My dad made the cedar headband. So it's all family. This was gifted to me from a lady by the name of Lynn. These are eagle feathers in eagle down. And this was gifted to me at the treatment center called Salton Lelam on Vancouver Island, where I went for a treatment for drug and alcohol, which is a different story altogether.
Yep. You don't want me to ask about that, do you?
Oh, I don't mind about that. I'm pretty good on that. I wrote a song called Put Down Their Weapons, and it is about alcohol. And I think today it's really important that if anybody wants to focus on anything, that it is real important that they put down that alcohol, the drugs, whatever. And that's what basically my song is about, which you'll have to catch at one of my concerts to hear that. So.
Is both drinking and drugs are a big part of the music industry. Has that been a problem for you over the years?
Yeah, it had been a real problem for me. You know, as much as I liked my involvement with music, I guess not knowing what the word ego and pride and all that good stuff was in life, I guess the biggest thing I wanted was just to be a star and wanted to be liked by, accepted by people. And mainly that was women. So that's really changed for me today, you know. I thought that you had to be a drinker and a drugger to be accepted, and it's not like that. You know, people accept people when they're real honest, and, you know, I just ended up losing control with that stuff, and I'm really glad that I'm off of it. You know, I'm not on it like the way I was. That was terrible. I was a totally different personality, because it was like a light switch for myself. Sometimes I'd be a nice, happy person, the next minute I'd be really impatient and grumpy, you know. So,
right.
Yeah, it's a big change in my life.
Mm-hmm. So where do you go from where you're sitting now?
I'd like to be teaching the public, the younger generation. I got nothing against with the elders listening to it as well, but I'd like to be able to share my songs through the style of rock music. At the same time, I feel that the kids would learn these songs.
Without knowing they're learning.
Yeah, without knowing they're learning the songs of peace and unity and what to do with each other. I see myself doing that down the road. I see myself working with children, literally working with children, telling stories. It's just something that I have to wait for. You know, like every musician has that same story. I'm waiting for that break. I'm waiting for that big break.
Rick has just released his newest collection, Spirit of the Wolf, a compilation of his best past material and many new songs.